Hey everybody, this is Dust for Dust on Gaming with another presentation analysis of the modern format, particularly of Burn, and that Burn is overrated. Some of you say that on the channel as you watch our videos that are not necessarily fans of the Burn archetype. And as to why this is, we'll get into here in a minute. But as always, just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe if you like what you're seeing on the channel, giving us a thumbs up, and leaving a constructive comment down below about this series. So, what makes Burn overrated, overplayed, etc.? So, this is from an article on channelfireball.com by Tobi Henke as to what's going on with Burn. Well, not only Burn, but the modern metagame period throughout various Grand Prix. So, what's going on with Burn? So, Burn obviously had the steady climb with the meta percentage here due to the printing of Late at the Stage and Skewer the Critics. People excited to try out those cards, and then kind of normalized and back off to like about 7 to 7.5% of the meta. But the reality is the deck's being played far more than its results suggest, because of all these 5 GPs, only one in Grand Prix Oakland did Burn's percentage actually exceed 50% of matches won. So what's going on? Why is Burn performing well? Why isn't it performing well? So as to the whys, these are some of the top matchups in the GPs broken down in the latest article as far as what's going on. So the top decks outside of Burn have been Izzet Phoenix, Tron, Blue-White Control, Dredge, Spirits, Shadow, Rock, Humans, and Red-Green Scrapeshift. This is all not including KCI data, which was relevant for what? I think Portland, Oakland, and Toronto. I think KCI was still technically legal. So what was going on? As far as the GP results themselves, based on this article, neutral indicates that there was no definitive thing in terms of the matches he gave, which numbers he gave tended to only be skewed one way or the other, so anything that was probably between 45 and 60% probably wasn't shown. So these neutral things just kind of shows that there weren't enough data to show the matchup was skewed one way or the other. Izzet Phoenix, the results obviously weren't posted. Overall, I think Izzet Phoenix is a slightly positive matchup for Burn. Tron, obviously, is a very positive matchup for Burn, and the results kind of back that up. Blue-White Control went 9-14, or Burn went 9-14 against Blue-White Control, which is kind of surprising, because in my experience, the Blue-White Control has been extremely positive for Burn. However, others like Space Marine on the channel would argue that it's the other way around. So it kind of depends on the build of Blue-White Control and the skill of the Blue-White Pilot, but we'll get into that here in a bit. Dredge, no definitive data, but obviously most of us know that Dredge is a kind of negative matchup because of Creeping Chill and other factors we'll get into. Spirits, the data showed this is a positive matchup, and in personal experience, I'd say it's a slightly positive matchup. Shadow, there was no definitive thing on the matchups one way or the other. Personal opinion, I think it's a slightly positive matchup for Burn, but I think there's a lot of skill on both sides of the equation. Rock, it's a negative matchup. The stats back that up. My own personal experience backs that up. Humans, very close matchup. In my opinion, it's a very close matchup. Depends on their sideboard. Recent sideboard trends suggest it's not a very positive matchup for Burn right now. And then Red-Green Scrapeshift, there are no data shown in the articles, but definitely a positive overall matchup. They're about a turn 4.5 deck. We're about a turn 4 deck. Obviously, it depends on their hate cards and such in the sideboard, their particular draws, our particular draws. But overall, pretty positive matchup. So what's going on with some of these other decks, particularly Blue-White Control, Dredge, Shadow, and Humans? Or Shadow and Rock and Humans. As far as decks, so what's going on with Blue-White Control? Blue-White Control lately has shifted to answer the Phoenix threat. So they're bringing in Relics of Progenitus. They got the card Absorb into the deck. Still playing Terminus, still playing Settle the Wreckage, but if you look here closely, there's a main deck Timely Reinforcements, which hasn't necessarily been the case throughout the last couple of months. Absorb being in the thing, being able to counterspell and gain 3 life. +6 versus burn is a huge swing, especially with timely reinforcements. Their counter spells are coming down. You're not seeing Logic Knot anymore. You're seeing Mana Leak and Negate, which are much more relevant early in the game. Spell Snare also pretty relevant against the burn lists. A lot of the playing Boros Charm or Lightning Helix or Skullcrack or Eidolon of the Great Revel, which is their biggest headache. So a lot of little things are adding up percentage points. And then the sideboard, Celestial Purge can come in this matchup. Timely Reinforcements, Baneslayer Angel, Lyra Dawnbringer, Negate, Dispel, Vendilion Click. A lot of very good cards against burn here. And I think this matchup comes down to a lot of experience. I think, and even some of the sideboard changes in burn. I used to historically run Exquisite Firecraft, which, if you get control down to 4 life and they have a ton of counter spells and you have no cards in your deck that you can resolve against their cryptic commands, their negates and such, you have to try to overwhelm their mana, and that's not always possible if they've got a Jace or a Teferi going. Whereas with Exquisite Firecraft, you just cast this 4 damage spell they can't counter and they're dead. Or, ironically, them running Relic of Progenitus means that's not necessarily an out if they leave that in the deck. But definitely shifts in the deck building and the fact that most people that are going to be running blue-white control at a Grand Prix level event tend to be very experienced with the deck. This is not a deck you pick up and try to spike a tournament with, which some people have the conception that you can just pick up burn and win a big event with it. Try to spike a GP, but we'll get that into the other factors at the end of the video. But it's an interesting swing that at least the GPLA, which I believe most of that data was pulled from the specific breakdown data, the 14 and 9 record for blue-white control. So this is just a recent example of a blue-white list and some of the key cards that are doing well and why maybe the burn matchup isn't quite as good for burn compared to blue-white as it used to be. So props to Space Marine for maybe being ahead of the curve on this one, and maybe we need to take a look at this as burn players. Dredge, I'm not going to cover too much about Dredge. If you don't know why burn has a rough time against Dredge, since the printing of Creeping Chill, you've kind of been living under a rock. Free Lightning Helixes make the matchup difficult when they already have a turn 4, turn 4.5 clock with Prized Amalgams and Narcomoebas and Bloodghasts. So not a whole lot else to cover here. Nature's Claims can be relevant if they think you're bringing in Graveyard Heat. Also can take out your Eidolons. And Lightning Axes obviously being pretty good against the creature draws out of burn. Black-Green Rock, this is kind of Eclipse Jund as the go-to Black-Green X deck. Their mana base is less painful. They have main deck Collective Brutality, Scavenging uses Tarmogoyfs, and now Kalitas to help fight against the Dredge and Phoenix decks. Liliana the Veil, obviously not that great for burn, limiting the resources of the burn deck, and then 3 or 4 copies of Fatal Push, and then a bunch of discard spells on a mana base that doesn't really damage them. Pretty easy to disrupt, and then sideboard they have Collective Brutalities and Kitchen Finxes to bring to the party as well. So lots of hate for burn here. This has been historically a close matchup. It's gotten worse in recent times as they've been switching towards main deck Kalitas, Collective Brutality being printed, etc. And finally, as far as matchups go, this one is probably the closest of the 4. Historically, I think the matchup's been pretty close. The main deck, I think, especially with Grim Lavamancer being moved to the main in a lot of these builds, I think the main deck game probably comes down to who's on the play. Sideboard, 4 Auriok Champion, a couple copies of Sin Collector and a Chemball. That's a lot of hate to fight through, especially since a lot of burn lists have gone away from Skullcrack, so your only way to fight Auriok Champion is Path to Exile, and when you've got 4 Auriok Champions and 4 Phantasmal Images, plus a bunch of creatures, a couple Militia Buglers to bind these cards, that's a lot of hate to fight through. So, what other factors are contributing to burn underperforming, particularly at the GP level? So a couple of things were going on during all these various things. Less tuned versions of the deck. We were all testing, Lay Up the Stage, Skewer the Critics. We were testing Rakdos. We were testing Gruul. We were testing various versions of Boros? Do we want Skullcrack cut from the main? Do we want Lightning Helix cut from the main? Do we want a split of the cards? What it came down to is people were testing these less tuned builds, playing Rakdos when it still seems that Boros is the better deck overall. And then one of the other articles that I'm not going to get into, but basically he said that Light Up the Stage, the results were just extremely negative. The decks that played Light Up the Stage really didn't perform as well. Their conversion rates to day 2 were pretty terrible. And even from our own testing earlier on the channel, this has proven to be true. The Light Up the Stage only really makes sense in the Mono Red Phoenix decks. It's not really all that good in the Burn decks. And the other thing is the perception of Burn. People think you can just pick up and play Burn and play it at 100% and spike a tournament. Well, I would say Burn has a lower learning curve than most decks. I would still say that, like any other deck in Modern, if you're going to a big event, if you're going to a Grand Prix, if you're going to a PTQ, you need to learn the deck. This is a deck that it may not have as many rewards for learning play lines and mulliganing and such as some other decks, like, say, Amulet Titan or Control, or even Is It Phoenix to a degree. I think people really need to understand that Burn is not like any other deck in Modern. You need to practice with your deck before going to a big event. And between the hype around the new cards and that constant perception that you can just, somebody can hand you a Burn deck the day of and you can, like, win the tournament, I think that probably contributed to a lot of newer Modern players, people that play Standard all the time, or people that play Draft or Limited, that wanted to go to a big event, might just pick up this deck and go, well, I can do well at a GP with, this simple deck. Not always the case at the Grand Prix level. You're playing against people that have played their deck, potentially hundreds, even thousands of matches. You gotta have some reps under your belt. So I think all those factors combined with, some of the shifts in some of the deck building to ironically counter Phoenix, not Burn, is contributing to Burn underperforming. So am I saying Burn's not good in Modern? No, I'm saying it's probably overplayed on the basis of perception and the fact that people were hyped for the new cards. And so I think it's a combination of less experienced players playing the deck and more hate, incidental hate, ironically, out of some of the top decks that we're playing against. Anyways, let me know what your opinion on this is. This has been Dust for Dusted on Gaming. Hope to see y'all later.